This panel is going to be talking about the impact of gun violence. And we're going to have our Dr. Joseph Richardson from University of Maryland. He'll be our mediator for that.
Before I start, I just want to thank Dr. Mullins for inviting me in for the Patients Program. And I want to preface before we get to the panel to talk about why this topic is so important to me. I'm a grant recipient of one of the Patients Program grants, so I'm one of the researchers who has used the Patients Program seed grant for my research. And actually, I just finished conducting one of the focus groups for my research this week. I am the program and research director of the Capital Region Violence Intervention Program at the University of Maryland Prince George's Hospital, which is a hospital-based violence intervention program that provides psycho and social services to primarily young people who have been injured, either through a gunshot wound, a stabbing, or assault. And why that is so important is because, at least in Prince George's County, which we serve Prince George's in Washington, D.C., last year we had 809 people who we treated for either a gunshot wound or a stabbing that came into our hospital. So we get a lot of violence. But one of the more important things I want to say about research and why it's so important, in 2013, before this program was started, which it started in 2017, I did a study with 25 young black men between 18 and 34 who are either a victim of a gunshot wound or a stabbing that came into our trauma unit, and I had to approach them at bedside with my colleague, Dr. Chris St. Ville. And we interviewed these young men 3 times over a course of 2 years and followed them back into their communities. One of the young men that I was working with in my study was actually stabbed 13 times and medevaced to my hospital and almost died. And one of the most important things that came out of that research, in addition to the violence intervention program that we created, was the fact that he not only was involved in the study, but ended up becoming one of the staff members for our program. He's in the back, Mr. Chet Bullock. So I just want to highlight how research can actually, and people that are involved in the research can also be involved in the interventions as well. So without any further ado, we have an illustrious group of panelists, and Erica Bridgeford, Damian Cooper, and DeJuan Patterson, and I will let them, each of them, give a brief introduction of what they do.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. So I'm the Director of Training at Community Mediation Maryland, and basically that means I mediate conflicts on a regular basis, and I train mediators to mediate conflicts. And I am a co-founder and co-organizer of Baltimore Ceasefire 365, and the next ceasefire weekend is happening August 3rd through August 5th. Tell everybody.
Good afternoon, my name is DeJuan Patterson. I'm Executive Director of the BMO Group, and I am, I like to coin the social impact consultant, so I do a lot of institutional advisement as well as community programming, doing direct action and also at the system levels of reform.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damian Cooper. I'm the founder and executive director of Project Numa. Project Numa is a holistic program that I started back in 2014 for middle school boys in grades 4 through 8, teaching them art of forgiveness, self-control, and discipline while giving them exposure to a new world and its possibilities. I team my young men up with the new recruits from the Baltimore City Police Department to break the negative stigma that kids of color and cops can't get along. I do this program because in 1992, I was a victim of gun violence, shot at point blank range by a young man who I later forgave and continued to work with. So I can forgive the man who shot me. We can work and teach our young men to forgive people about their neighborhoods, their environments, and things like that.
All right, so I just want to put some statistics in context, at least as it relates to Baltimore City. So there have been 23 homicides in Baltimore City in the last 30 days, and 154 beginning in January 2018. And I know that our panelist just expressed that he has been a survivor, and I like to use the term survivor instead of victim of a gunshot wound. But I would like the panelists to discuss and describe how has gun violence impacted your life both personally and in your community.
I grew up in West Baltimore, Bloomingdale and Poplar Grove area, Zone 16. When I was 12, it was the first time I was awakened by gunshots in the middle of the night and saw one of my friends dying on the sidewalk. And then from there, I just lost friend after friend all through middle school, all through high school. 2 of my 3 brothers have been shot, one of them killed. My stepson has been killed, my countless cousins. And so it is, so for a while when I was younger, I realized that I assumed that this must be what people like me and in neighborhoods like mine deserved. So it impacts your self-esteem and your self-worth a lot because you don't realize that violence is a symptom of oppressive systems that are happening to your neighborhood. You just think that maybe there's something wrong with the people in your neighborhood. And so it takes a while to understand that it is not about what's wrong with you, it's about what's happened to you. And so I constantly mourn of the, this year I'm mourning 4 people who have been killed this year, 2 of them women. Often I go to funerals 2 in one day, some years. And so it's like a constant journey, intimate journey with violence and murder. And so what I'm learning is that murder does not get to have the last say, my resilience does.
Since I was a young child, I've been exposed to gun violence quite frequently, to the point where as though it became my norm and my family norm. For as long as I can remember, as early as about 6 or 7 years old, I delivered my first eulogy at one of my cousin's funeral. And one thing I noticed as time progressed, every 2 to 3 years, we were losing the oldest male child to gun violence. And upon my 17th year of living on this earth, I fall victim to that curse that I believed. And I was robbed and shot in my head and left to die. However, I actually survived. And it was a level of rebirth and introducing to my purpose to forever make a commitment to preventing gun violence and preventing a solution for, well, providing a solution for the person in front of the gun as well as the person behind the gun. So in every step and every action that I take, I'm giving another day above ground to continue to deliver on that promise. And I can proudly say, after the incidents of my survival story, we have not lost a male relative in my family since.
Wow.
I echo the sentiments of Erica and Dewan as far as growing up in the projects of East Baltimore, Broadway Homes, which is no longer there, is now Johns Hopkins parking lot. They say they would never do that.
That's another panel discussion.
Exactly. Very true. So, in my youth, one thing I remember, we lived in the middle of the project. So if you live in a project, you know, anything that went down in the middle of the projects. And so I remember one day we were sitting in the house and someone got shot and ran into our house. And the guy that shot him tried to run behind him. My grandmother smashed the door in the guy's face and basically knocked the gun out of his hand. And as we're sitting there, you know, in the projects, there was no beautiful carpet. There was just hard ground. And so this guy was basically bleeding out on our floor. And I remember looking at it. And the part is that I don't remember it really affecting me because we've seen it so much. And so now, at the ripe age of 46, with all this wonderful gray hair, when I work with these young boys in the city, they don't fear guns. They don't fear violence. And that's something wrong with that. There's a lot of trauma there when they're already desensitized to gun violence. And so we work very hard to allow them to tap into their emotions because a lot of them don't want to show their emotions. They've been taught that you have to be a man at a boy's age. And so this is what we really try to instill because the thing is, I don't want them to go through what I went through or what I've seen growing up.
Recently, The Never Again movement has brought more national attention to gun violence. But some have commented that gun violence has been a public health crisis in Black and brown communities for decades, yet has received minimal national attention as a public health problem. Gun violence in these communities has been criminalized in the same ways that crack use has been criminalized. What are your thoughts about this? And do you feel that the Never Again movement is inclusive of the communities most affected by gun violence?
One thing I've learned that a lot of times if it happens in the white community and they stand up, they'll get the press attention. In our communities, oftentimes it doesn't happen at all. It's disparaging, it angers us. But what I hope and I pray is that those kind of movements, if it's going to spark something, let it be real and not just a photo op or some time on TV. This has been going on a long time in the Black community, every single day. We just had a young 7-year-old girl who just died. So we're going to stand up, let's stand up for that. Let's be on TV for that. Let's be on national news for that every single day until we can find out who murdered our kids.
I had the luxury of also sitting on a national council of millennials against gun violence. And this council consisted of multicultural, I should say. And I was sitting on this council for years, and we were equipped with strategies and traveling around the country in different cities who've been impacted by gun violence. And then this year, when the Never Again movement happened, Parkland happened, once again, I was invited to speak on a panel. And a question like this came up. And of course, I'm gonna bring the honest truth. And I said, it's quite interesting how gun violence has been impacting the urban communities for generations and times. And myself was one of those advocates who would stand out on the front line to bring about the awareness and try to bring solutions and resources to impact the prevention of gun violence. However, now, I asked the audience the questions of funders, politicals, and policymakers. How many foundations, national foundations that you know raised over $100,000 to $500,000 addressing urban gun violence as a result of a single gun violence incident that gained national or local attention? Nobody can answer that question. But here you hear, Parkland happened and Never Again other moves and such as like that, not discredit anybody that was participating or survived that incident. But you notice that they received over $500,000 instantly. Not only the financial capital, but the social and the political capital stacked behind them, bringing about this movement. But here you have survivors and advocates that have been on the front line, been arrested, and continuously, tirelessly, put their jobs on the line, their lives on the line to bring about the awareness and solutions on that. So do I say that the Never Again is very inclusive of voices such as myself and the people that you see before you? No. But however, I was afforded the opportunity once again to bring about that singular narrative with March for Our Lives. And when they asked where was the people of color voices, and I made sure that Baltimore was included on that, and in the national discussion where we challenge Parkland students to share the microphone, your platform, your resources, and also your privilege. So when you have that privilege, make sure you provide the opportunities and resources.
So I'm gonna try not to repeat what's already been said, and I feel like the question already had a built-in narrative and answer in it. And so what I wanna say is I am very, I want middle-aged to older, well-intentioned, well-meaning white people to follow the example of the young gangster white people, right? Because these kids are not playing any games, right? So as I've been following the younger generation, as they're having conversations about gun violence, they constantly, not only do they challenge big stuff like the NRA and call out all of their nonsense, but they are also calling adults to task about why this very thing happens all the time. That when it is white faces, that it's national attention, and when it's people of color every day, that there's not. And so I applaud the young people's efforts and the way that they're trying to bring a different kind of culture to what activism looks like around gun violence, to be more inclusive of their peers of color that they know go through this more regularly than they do. And also my experience with the media is that, so I was asked to speak at the National March for Our Lives march. Initially I wasn't going to be able to even go, but my problem was the media was contacting me at a time when children were grieving and had been traumatized. They were contacting me to ask me this very question, like, didn't I think it was wrong that the white kids were getting all of this attention? And my very first thing is compassion, because I know what it was like to get the phone call when it was my brother. I know what it's like to watch somebody bleed out in front of me. And that's not the time to start a debate about who gets more attention. Don't ask me that question when I've been the leader of the ceasefire movement for only a year and you have never contacted me yet. So clearly you know who I am because you knew how to contact me when you wanted a quote from what you thought was a powerful Baltimore leader. But you didn't do it until there was a narrative that you wanted to fan a flame in. And now you're participating in the very thing you're saying you're writing an article about. You haven't contacted me about black lives that we're losing every day in Baltimore City, but now that it's white lives, you want a quote from me about how I feel about white faces having this kind of importance. And the last thing I want to say is recently when there were murders in Annapolis, at that same time there were 10 days of no murder in Baltimore City, right? That wasn't on the news. So I made a post that we were celebrating, and it wasn't even a thought of comparison. I just happened to realize, yo, we on day 10, what is happening? And I figured nobody else was paying attention, so we made a post, and a white lady came and commented and said, well, I know Annapolis is not Baltimore, but ... Before I could even respond, like, people swarmed on her comment. And so she ended up having to say, you know, that she really regretted even making the comment. And I was saying to her that human beings are complex people. We are able to do we are able to grieve lives lost in Annapolis and celebrate lives saved for 10 days in Baltimore City. And we're gonna do both. And so she ended up saying that she regretted making the comment because she also realized that if there were 5 homicides in Baltimore on one day, the way there were 5 homicides in Annapolis, nobody would know those people's names on a national level that same way. So I really want to challenge white people to really check your privilege and how it shows up in these conversations.
In 1996, the Dickey Amendment essentially banned the CDC and NIH from funding gun violence research. Thus, for over 20 years, gun violence research has not been funded. What impact do you think that this has had on what we know or don't know about gun violence, and how can we advocate for more of our tax dollars to be used to fund gun violence research?
Me, given my professional training of being a researcher and going into my undergraduate college experience, I went off to really study what contributed to youth violence and aggression. And being in that realm of academia and research, I started to discover some things that would contribute to youth violence and aggression. And when it stems around gun violence, and I pulled back, I was doing my own independent research project. And I actually had to pull back from that research project because it was so traumatic. The more findings that were revealed, it revealed more about myself. And and some of the things that was discovered, wouldn't say discovered because it was, some of the things that were revealed was the level of post-traumatic stress that gun violence survivors and third to second party family members experience regularly. And I was just to take you through the biological standpoint of the chemical imbalance and the reaction that we have and that every human has. We all heard of the fight or flight, correct? Yeah. So the fight or flight is a natural reflex inside of our bodies and our makeup. So if a person, and this is research proven if we was to cross-examine a vet that's coming back from a war-stricken zone, they suffer from post-traumatic stress, and they have the inability to distinguish the difference between a threat and a non-threat stimuli. And if a person has the inability to distinguish the difference between a threat and a non-threat stimuli, the natural thing for them to do is a fight or flight. And if you are trained to eliminate the threat, and then you also have the inability to distinguish the difference between the two, so then you have the overreaction of reptilian part of the brain that everything's around me potentially is a threat. So now I need to eliminate that threat to have my personal safety. So we put that in the context of a person living in an urban community that's ridden and plagued by gun violence and poverty. So now they have the inability to distinguish the difference between a threat and a non-threat stimuli. So now if I know that there's a possibility that 1 out of 4 individuals that are surrounding me potentially could be a threat or possesses a weapon to kill me, then now I would like to secure my personal safety to eliminate that threat. So we think of something like that. So now that's something that research will help to propel and change the narrative that something that's happening in urban communities. So now once we remove that person from that real toxic combative environment, we can allow the brain to go in the rest state and eliminate that constant overreaction of fight or flight with an absence of the logical thinking. And I am a living example of that, because once I was removed from my environment, I went onto a college campus and I was allowed to relax my brain, and I could show the creativity and intelligence that a young black man from Baltimore exists.
It's not much to be said after that. So the only thing I want to say is this, is that in Baltimore City, there is a map that's put out, and it's called the Life Expectancy Map. And in this map, I'm going to use a certain area. So I live in an area called Glen. It's off of Northern Parkway, Park Heights. Directly across the street is, they call them Southern Park Heights, or like Hilltop. And so in my area, if you see this map, the area I live in is plush green. Directly across the street. Now, I'm gonna say it again. Directly across Northern Parkway, it goes from plush green to blood red. On this map, it goes from plush green to regular green, yellow, like an orange color, and then it's blood red. And so again, once you cross the street, you go from plush green to blood red. And on top of that, your life expectancy changes by 20 years. If you cross the street, or if you come to my side, 20 years. Many of our communities, many of our black communities are in these blood red areas that don't have resources, they don't have adequate schools, they don't have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basic needs of life. Right. So if you can't get the basic things in life, a lot of our young people are going to go after everything they can, because those basic things they want aren't being met. Everyone wants to be told I love you. Yes. Everyone wants to feel esteemed. Everyone wants to go to a safe house. Everyone wants food in the refrigerator, and I have to run to a carry-out or some kind of corner store. But our communities don't have this. So like Dewan was saying, these communities that we are being brought up in, being raised in, are not conducive. And I'm gonna take one step further and look at the policymakers and our leaders. These things have been going on in our cities, not just Baltimore, but all around this country for years. And oftentimes, these communities never change. They come in, they give us a few trinkets and some shiny baubles, but then it's done. And our kids remain the same. violent, upset, confused, and seeking help. And when they can't get help from people in nice suits and ties to be there all the time, they're gonna look for the help of the people who look like them on those streets who are telling them to do the things that are contrary to what they should be doing.
I want to answer this piece of the question about how has it impacted us that that kind of research has been blocked and stopped. And so it is a clear indicator that it is in somebody's plan to destroy people of color and to make sure that there isn't research, because if that kind of research was allowed, you would find out that people in Baltimore are not savages. Right? You would find out what the root causes of violence actually are. You would find out that young people are not the ones creating violent conditions. Young people have been asking us to stop it. And so if they are violent, it is because we are violent. Right? It is because they are raised in a violent culture. America teaches us that violence is power. The soil that we are standing on was taken by force and rape and plunder and pillage. That is how we are here. And so when people are disempowered in a culture that teaches that violence is the way you get power, and everything around them teaches them that, from the shows that they're watching, to the things they're seeing on screens, to the music that they're listening to. And it's not just hip hop, let's be very clear. There's enough violence to go around in every genre of music and every genre of TV show. And so so I don't want us to think about it like it's our young people who are just violent. Young people are violent because adults have created a violent culture. And until we take responsibility for the world we have created for young people to try to navigate their way in, we won't be able to heal this disease and this epidemic. But without that kind of research, right? So if you can't prove that you've done something to people, you can keep saying it's their fault. Right? And so it behooves the system to be able to just keep pointing the fingers at the victims of all of this and blame the victim and say that they are just savages and there's something wrong with them. So let's pile their bodies in the corner. Let's pile their bodies in prison. Let's not at all take a look at how we've created all of this and to heal those things and put funding into those things and make sure the resources are there. And so without that kind of research, we continue to stay in the holes that we're in until we wake up and decide that we're going to dig ourselves out.
So I had a question that I wanted to ask that I had written, but you guys took me on a tangent where I have to ask this question. So there's a concept called structural violence, where you can prevent harm that happens to specific populations. So let's just take, for example, Freddie Gray, who lived in Sandtown, Winchester, where the life expectancy was approximately 62 or 63 years old, right? Which is the life expectancy in Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Life expectancy in Baltimore is roughly 71, 72 years old. So why do you think that when we have places that are food deserts, that have dilapidated housing, poor infrastructure, poor educational systems, that we tend not to classify that as violence?
Because racism. So oppression is one of the most successful endeavors ever taken on by the human experience, right? And so, so if we take, for instance, imagery, right? So the imagery is that people who wear white t-shirts and saggy jeans are violent and dangerous on sight, right? But white men in suits and ties are safe and to be respected. Nobody kills more people around the world than white men in suits and ties. Nobody. Just white men as a group in general have been, that's what they do. Like, they show up, they want it, they take it, they kill everything smoking, and then that's how they, right? And then they make up terms like dog eat dog and survival of the fittest so that it sounds courageous and brave and strong. And really it is terror. But then the narrative that gets created century after century is that these are the people we are to trust, and the people that they are inflicting violence upon are the ones that are dangerous. And so, we can't call the thing that we're doing violent. We have to do the switcheroo and say that what we're doing is just being successful. And we are, if I'm successful and how I've gotten riches for my family and generations to come, it's because I pulled myself up by the bootstraps, and you just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps too. Never admitting that, first of all, I don't have boots because you took them from me. And I made your bootstraps that you're talking about you pulling yourself up by.
Most of the major philanthropic organizations are run by who? Not Black people. And so in order to get money, and I run a nonprofit, so in order to get funds, you often have to use what we like to refer as deficit framing words. So in order to get money to help my community, I have to put in this grant proposal. Oh, I'm here to help these at-risk, disadvantaged, poor Black youth who's live in these disadvantaged neighborhoods not kill one another, and so they can get to come up. And that's how I get money. Instead of me just saying, I like to help Black youth thrive and survive. That won't get me the money to help. I have to use deficit framing words. And year after year, this is what we're doing. And so if you look at the biggest nonprofits, again, you won't see our faces in our pictures. You won't see us getting the biggest pieces of the pie to really help our communities and the communities that we live in, that we're in every single day. It's always geared to those who don't look like us. And again, nothing against anybody else, but it's just how it is. It is how it is. Until we truly begin to invest in those who are truly doing the work in the communities, the people like the Erica Bridgefords and the DeJuan Pattersons, we can continue with this cycle of violence. And even people like Troy Staten back there, who does a tremendous work at his barbershop. But again, that won't get noticed because he's not going to grovel and ask for those things by putting his own people down to get it.
This is the final question that I have. Universities are often criticized for coming into low-income communities of color to conduct research where the residents are often subjects of the research but not involved in advising the direction of the research or helping researchers frame the questions that really need to be asked. In what ways should individuals and communities most affected by gun violence be involved in gun violence research? And how can that research be used to empower communities to address it?
Have the community involved in every step of the way in the research. From the design phase, development, the implementing it, evaluating, every aspect of it, have the community involved in it. Making sure that the research project is mutually beneficial. Not just coming inside the community, extracting information as always, and leaving the community lacking outcomes, visible deliverables that could be beneficial to them as you get massive grant dollars and the communities are left standing the same condition in which you found them. So these are some of the easiest ways to bring about that solution. And then how should this research be used? The research should be used for the embedment of the community in which you're asking to be partners in your research, not subjects. Because oftentimes in research we see subjects and not partners. And we should see the community residents as partners. Because if you see someone as a partner, then you see the mutual benefit and value and such.
One thing I'm going to say was, for authenticity, and I'm happy to say it. People like Dr. Daniel Mullins and his patients program, they're doing just that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I kid you not, I will not co-sign on any kind of foolishness. But this man right here, and what he's doing in the communities with the living, learning, health communities and his team, they are doing it. And during the day, I work in City Hall. I'm senior staff for the City Council President. And every day I get somebody telling me, ask me, how can I help? What can we do? And I'm constantly saying, take the page out of the book of Dr. Daniel Mullins, what they're doing at the University of Maryland. That's real straight talk. He is getting to the root of it. And again, it's sincere, it's authentic, and I truly appreciate who you are and what you do every day. I mean, he's a doctor, he's brilliant, but you can text this man. He's rocking a pair of Nikes right now in jeans. And so again, they're not giving no checks for this. But Dr. Mullins, you should stand up for a quick second. You turn around and face the people. Yeah, that's right. Stand up and face the people. That's what success looks like in a program. That's what it's like.
I would like to give just a living example of how the Patience Program and Dr. Mullins is currently and past included the community in such work. I know for myself, Dr. Mullins called me and he said that he was having a position open for the Director of Research for the program. And he made it his business, the philosophy, the principle, the values, to make sure that the community partners and community residents was taking part in the interview process, the hiring process of the person that's going to lead the research for the program. So that tells you a lot. So I commend you, Dr. Mullins, for continuing that commitment.
So I have some questions from the audience, and the first question is, what about police violence as a determinant of health?
I definitely answer this one. So, back in 2014, I won an award for $10,000, which can be used for anything. And that's when I decided to start Project Numa. I wanted to work with boys, but again, I would also really deal with some of the stuff that was going on because I was burning inside from Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. So, the commissioner we had then was Anthony Batts. And I asked him, could I do my program at the actual police academy with the actual recruits? So I have my boys being trained with these young men and women. Oftentimes what I've seen, and again, I hear from all ends. You know, I see it in City Hall, I see it as a minister, I see it as a father, I see it all over the place. But me being there with these officers, a lot of them are scared children too. A lot of them are facing a lot of trauma too. A lot of them a lot of them are bullied. A lot of them, you know, are still dealing with what they've been taught. Like there's a saying that more is caught than taught. Right? And so each and every day we work to really build bridges. Yes, we have some bad officers. We do. But we have a whole lot of great ones who want to do a lot of great work. And we can get on social media, we can get on TV, and we can say all cops are bad, all cops are out here to kill black kids, but that is not the case. And I'm often told that I'm stupid because they're going to kill your boys anyway, Damien. But my thing is this, when does the real conversation start? The real work starts. Because if the only thing we can do is complain and say they're going to kill us, what's going to happen? What's going to change? We have to be able to take steps. And they may not be the most popular steps, but I don't believe that the police are all out to kill our kids. I believe that we have a racist system that has been here since the dawn of time, and it will not change till all of us start speaking truth to power to it and not being afraid of it to make things happen. So I'm not going to go into how it's the police fault because I can't say that. I'm not going to say that it is.
Thank you. Well, I would say police violence impacting mental health as well, especially speaking from experience of being a black man in America. Even in my victimhood of being a gunshot survivor, well, actually at the incident, after being shot, and seeking help, I was staring down the barrel of another gun, and it was the police. And then they was terrorizing me and my community afterwards. So even in my victimhood, I still was criminalized. And while I'm only 17, and knowing that this is the nature and experience within my neighborhood, not only because of the color of my skin, the zip code in which I live, and the social economic status of my family I was birthed into. So having those experiences in there, you can only imagine every time the police lights come on behind us. We always, I'm in the right, but there's little heart beats just going harder. There's like many minor heart attacks that happen every time. And this naturally happens for us. So that's something how the police violence is constantly triggering for us.
Police violence is is a microcosm and an example of the dangers of when people in power are also violent. And that doesn't just happen with police. If we really are going to be real about it, it happens between parents and children. Right? We teach our children through the fear of we're going to be violent toward them if they don't do right. And so again, the police system and the way policing is set up, it literally is just a mirror within the system of America's culture that violence is power. And that when you're going to have power over somebody, violence is the way to do it. And so the policing system is set up within that culture. And so police violence, of course, causes all kind of health problems for communities, just like parental abuse causes health problems for children. And domestic abuse causes health problems in families, right? So any kind of power imbalance where violence is used as power, you're going to have health problems show up.
I'm going to ask 2 questions, and each one of you can answer one of them directly.
Okay.
Here's one. I just recently lost a close friend due to gun violence. My question would be, how do I forgive the man who took my friend from me?
Time. So, Gail and I share the same pastor, and he always tells me to tell the entire story. Oftentimes I never tell people after I got shot how it really messed me up mentally, and to the point where I wanted to take my own life. And I decided on December 31st, 1996, New Year's Eve, so I know in Baltimore at midnight everybody's gonna start firing off. So I was gonna take my life that night until 2 of my friends, I guess with divine intervention, decided to ring my doorbell and break their necks and make me go to church with them. And while I'm in this church service, this pastor, the pastor there, he had a guest preacher come in at night. His name was Reverend Michael Coles. And Reverend Coles, a light-skinned guy, he was a pastor of the church right there, 7th Baptist Church, right there at the corner of St. Paul and North Avenue. And he preached from the book of Psalms, Psalms 30, verse 5.
Go ahead.
And it says, "For his anger endureth but a moment, in his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." And as I'm sitting in the back of this church, waiting for somebody to pray so I can slip out, because I was ticked off, Reverend Coles simply started to say, every single one of us are going to go through a night season. Yeah. He said some of your night seasons may last a week, 2 weeks, 3 or 4, 5, 10 years, but we're all going to go through a night season. It doesn't matter if your stature in life, how much money you got, we're all going to have those times when you feel like you can't make it another day, when you feel like you need somebody to carry you. But if you hold on just a little while, and have a little faith, your joy will come. Now I'm sitting in this church, again, going through things, looking at the date, December 31st, 1996. And I'm now starting to backtrack the date of when I got shot, October the 13th, 1992. That came up to be 4 years, 2 months, and 18 days. So for 4 years, 2 months, and 18 days, I was an angry and pissed off black boy, full of blank and vinegar.
It wasn't me. Just for the record, it wasn't me.
Well, I can remember I'm saved. So,
normally me.
But it took time. The pain is going to be there. And it's going to hurt. And I never thought in a million years that I would sit face to face with the man that shot me, who I've been mentoring a year and a half and didn't even know it was him, and didn't know it was me.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yes, God.
So when we found out that it was him, I forgive him in that church service. But sitting across from him, I was able to forgive him to his face. Until this very day, I still work with the man who shot me an inch above the heart. That ricocheted and cracked my sternum. That ricocheted and broke their ribs. And ricocheted and lodged under the nerves of my right arm. And I still have 3 bullet fragments in my chest. And I can look at this man and tell him that I love him and I care about him, but it took time. So if you're angry, be angry. Write it down. Scream. Do what you need to do. Heal. But time and faith, and I'm going to throw out there, and prayer works the whole lot. That's my suggestion.
I have to wrap this up, but there was a question that was given, and I don't want to say the question, but I actually want to make the statement that preceded the question, because I think it's important to say. So whoever's question this is, thank you. The person had written, "This panel has fed my soul." Thank you.